Over 2 million pounds of canned tomatoes were pulled from shelves after sharp plastic shards were found floating inside. Another major brand faced lawsuits when its cans started exploding due to a faulty lining. And then there's the one selling fake Italian imports, tricking Americans into paying gourmet prices for factory sludge from New Jersey. These aren't isolated accidents. They're red flags we've ignored for too long. So the next time you reach for a can of tomatoes thinking it's harmless, ask yourself this: what's really inside? Is it just tomatoes? Or are you swallowing a mix of chemical residue, shady sourcing, and outright fraud? You're about to see the 5 most dangerous canned tomato brands you should avoid at all costs. But it doesn't end there, because there are still honest companies out there. The kind that don't cut corners, don't lie on labels, and actually care what ends up on your plate. Stick around. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which cans to toss, and which ones to finally trust. Number 1. Pacific Coast Producers. Pacific Coast Producers isn't just another name brand. It's the largest tomato canner in America, and right now it's accused of deliberately misleading people. This company's products are everywhere in grocery stores, on private label shelves and discount chains, and among those cans are ones labeled "no preservatives." But here's the kicker: those same cans contain citric acid, which legal filings say is a preservative. That makes the label false by design. This class action lawsuit claims that company knows its labeling misleads health-aware buyers into paying more for preservative-free when the truth is otherwise. That's why this brand sits at the top of the list. What turns things darker is the scale of the risk. Folks who buy those no preservatives tomatoes think they're doing better for their bodies, avoiding hidden chemicals, perhaps protecting kids, perhaps avoiding acid reflux or allergies. Yet under that label lies a chemical class recognized by regulators as one that delays or prevents deterioration, definitionally a preservative. Pacific Coast Producers is being sued under multiple state laws for false advertising, breach of warranty, unjust enrichment. The damages sought run into millions of dollars. This is not trivial. Consumers didn't just feel cheated, they allege financial harm because they didn't get what they believed they were buying. When trust breaks like this, with something as basic as canned tomatoes, every meal becomes suspect. But what makes this case especially terrible isn't just the chemical issue. It's what this mislabeling represents: a long practice of counting on people not reading ingredient panels, of leaning on wellness marketing to demand premium price. It is a system that burdens those who try to eat wisely. It punishes seniors trying to manage blood pressure, families trying to avoid additives, people with allergies. The deception isn't subtle, it's baked in. That's why this brand has to come first. It's not enough to dislike something, it must be exposed, so people can stop handing over their hard-earned dollars. You deserve to know exactly how small print and glossy labels have turned basic food into a trap. Up next, we'll dig into Hunt's and show you how another familiar name has quietly crossed lines. After that, you'll understand which brands are so compromised they should be off your pantry shelf for good. Number 2, Hunt's.
Hunt's tomato paste are under recall. The company says during the canning process, the product may have been damaged, creating the potential for mold inside them. I want to show you a closer look right now.
Hunt's is a name that sits in nearly every supermarket aisle. For decades, people have grabbed those bright red cans thinking they were choosing something wholesome, something familiar. But the closer you look, the less comforting it becomes. Hunt's has faced not only packaging recalls, but also a steady stream of questions about the way it processes and markets its tomatoes. And the reason it sits second on this list is because of how deep the concerns run once you peel back the label. One of the most alarming issues lies in the company's processing standards. Hunt's tomatoes are peeled using a chemical bath of lye. Yes, the same caustic soda used in drain cleaner is also used to strip the skins from tomatoes before they are packed. Regulators permit the practice, and the company insists it is safe. But many nutrition experts argue that residues can remain, and that heating tomatoes in lye alters texture and flavor while destroying beneficial nutrients. It is a shortcut method, faster and cheaper than traditional steam peeling, and it tells you a lot about priorities: speed over quality, efficiency over nutrition. Then comes the question of packaging. Hunt's, owned by Conagra, has faced recalls tied to defective can linings. The inner coating, meant to protect food from metal leaching, has been known to degrade, leaving consumers with cans that hiss, spray, or even bulge unnaturally. The risk is not just a mess in the kitchen. When that barrier breaks down, what leaks into the food is a mix of metals and industrial compounds linked in studies to hormonal disruption and long-term health effects. This isn't an internet rumor. This is a documented defect that forced the company to pull products from shelves. But Hunt's controversies extend beyond the can. Investigations have highlighted how the brand sources its tomatoes from large-scale operations in California's Central Valley, a region long criticized for heavy pesticide use, water depletion, and labor practices that stretch human endurance. When a company scales to feed tens of millions, every decision has ripple effects. Farm workers in the fields breathing in pesticide, drift communities downstream coping with nitrates in their drinking water, consumers buying cans, without knowing the human and environmental costs baked into the price tag. Hunt's isn't unique in facing these charges, but as one of the biggest names in the canned tomato market, it shoulders a level of responsibility it hasn't lived up to. Why does this matter for you? Because many households buy Hunt's by the case. They're trusted for spaghetti sauces, chili soups. And yet inside those cans may be tomatoes that have lost their nutritional edge from lye treatment, absorbed traces from defective linings, or come from farms where laborers worked under brutal heat for wages that barely cover rent. When you picture those cans lined neatly in the pantry, the question is less about convenience and more about cost, what it costs your health, your trust, and the people who bring those tomatoes from soil to shelf. That is why Hunt's cannot be brushed off as just another brand. It is a case study in how mass production, chemical shortcuts, and corporate marketing combine to sell a story of simplicity while hiding a more troubling reality. And that is why it earns its place at number 2 on this list. So 3, Neil Jones food. If you see a can stamped with Neil Jones food on the bottom, the best thing you can do is toss it straight in the trash. This is not an exaggeration. This is a company that has put out products tainted with hard plastic fragments sharp enough to damage teeth or lodge in a throat. The recall was limited in size, but the message is bigger than numbers. It shows a facility where quality checks failed so badly that foreign objects made it past processing, past packaging, and into cans that ended up on store shelves. When you talk about food safety, a mistake like that is not a minor slip. It is a system breakdown. Canned tomatoes are supposed to be simple fruit juice, a little salt. There is no reason a family opening a can for dinner should have to worry about swallowing shards. And yet that is exactly what federal inspectors found. The real issue with Neil Jones food is consistency, or rather the lack of it. Unlike household names that plaster their logos across every label, this company often works behind the scenes. Their tomatoes are repacked and sold under different banners. That means you may have eaten them without even realizing it. A restaurant supply tin, a private label can at a discount chain, an institutional order for schools or hospitals, Neil Jones plays in those spaces. Consumers rarely see the brand, which makes accountability even harder. If something goes wrong, the company can fade into the background while blame shifts elsewhere. Now add to this the pressure of industrial scale. Processing thousands of tons of tomatoes means mechanical sorting, conveyor belts, massive vats of puree. In that environment, the smallest oversight can snowball. A cracked piece of equipment, a broken paddle, a cheap sealant peeling off suddenly, you have a contaminant mixed into food that was supposed to be safe. By the time anyone notices, hundreds of cases are already shipped. That is how plastic found its way into diced tomatoes. It is not a 1 in a million accident. It is the predictable outcome of pushing volume over vigilance. The troubling part is how little most shoppers know about this company. It is not Hunt's, it is not Del Monte, it is not a brand you recognize. That anonymity protects it. Supermarkets buy bulk, restaurants cut costs, and Neil Jones fills the gap with product that carries someone else's label. Consumers think they are safe choosing a store brand. But the truth is that Neil Jones has been behind repeated recalls, flagged for foreign objects and labeling failures. And each time the warnings are buried in legal notices and trade bulletins that ordinary people never see. So why does this matter so much? Because food safety is not just about avoiding bacteria or spoilage. It is about trust. When you cannot even trust that what is in the can is just tomatoes, then the system is broken. The illusion of safety is dangerous. People assume the FDA or USDA catches everything. In reality, oversight is stretched thin, and recalls often come only after a consumer reports a problem. That means someone had to bite down on that plastic before alarms were raised. Neil Jones Food is not a brand you want anywhere near your pantry. The recalls prove the risk, and the shadowy role they play in the supply chain makes it even worse. That is why it earns the number 3 spot. Hidden, inconsistent, and proven unsafe, these are tomatoes that do not belong on your table. Number 4, Ingomar Packing. Picture a company moving tomatoes, not by the truckload, but by the lake. Ingomar Packing isn't a brand you see on a supermarket shelf, but it sits behind a massive portion of the food service industry. Think restaurants, schools, cafeterias, even hospitals. When one processor controls that much, a single slip becomes a nationwide headache. And in 2019, a slip did happen. Federal recall notices documented more than 1.8 million pounds of diced tomatoes pulled back because of foreign plastic pieces. That is not a typo. 1.8 million pounds. Enough to fill football stadiums, not just shopping carts. Now ask yourself this: if a processor that large let shards of plastic float into tomato drums, what else could be sliding under the radar? The issue wasn't a broken jar in grandma's pantry. It was industrial scale, a reminder that when volume is king, vigilance takes the back seat. It is the food equivalent of a factory line car recall. You are not just talking about one bad, you're talking about thousands of kitchens serving meals that never should have left the plant. The troubling part is how little visibility consumers have. Ingomar doesn't print its name in bold across your pantry. Instead, it sells to distributors who repackage under other labels. You might have eaten its product in a chain restaurant at a school lunch or in a bowl of chili served at a senior center. It is like the ghostwriter of the tomato world, invisible to the public, but shaping meals everywhere. And like a ghostwriter, it does not take the blame on the cover. That anonymity makes recalls harder for everyday people to track. By the time news spreads, most of the product is already eaten. To be fair, Ingomar isn't some mom and pop struggling to keep the lights on. It is one of the largest tomato processors in California's Central Valley, where more than 90% of America's processing tomatoes are grown. That region is a powerhouse, but it is also a pressure cooker, constant drought-heavy pesticide use, and rising labor disputes. When a facility is tasked with pushing out product at such scale, mistakes stop being accidents and start becoming inevitabilities. The comparison older folks might chuckle at is a casino slot machine play long enough and the odds guarantee a loss. With Ingomar, the loss just happened to be millions of pounds of tainted tomatoes. Then there is the bigger picture. Bulk processors like this often serve institutional buyers who chase the lowest bid. Cost-cutting can mean thinner inspections, older equipment, and corner-cutting maintenance. If you have ever seen a public building with flickering fluorescent lights that never get fixed, imagine that same culture applied to a food plant. Not glamorous, not deadly on day one, but slowly eroding safety until a recall is the only option. This is why Ingomar earns the 4th spot on the list. Not because it is a household brand, but because its reach is hidden and massive. It touches meals across the country in ways shoppers cannot trace. And when it fails big plastic and tomatoes by the million-pound barrel. If you ever wondered why canned goods can feel like a gamble, Ingomar is a reminder that sometimes the deck is stacked and consumers never get to see the dealer. Number 5, San American. San American Tomatoes, or SMT for short, wants you to think you are buying the gold standard of Italian produce. The label has the same green, white, and red scheme as San Marzano, the tomatoes that carry a protected designation of origin from Italy's Campania region. The font is suspiciously close, the imagery even closer. Consumers who glance at it on the shelf see SMT and connect the dots. Surely this must stand for San Marzano tomatoes. Except it does not. It stands for San American tomatoes grown in fields that have nothing to do with the volcanic soil of Mount Vesuvius. That trick is not speculation. It is the basis of an active lawsuit filed against Simpson Imports, the company behind SMT. The complaint says the packaging was calculated to confuse buyers into believing they were purchasing authentic San Marzano. And the damages are not theoretical. Genuine San Marzano tomatoes fetch a premium, sometimes 3 or 4 times the cost of ordinary canned Roma tomatoes. Shoppers paid that premium for SMT only to later discover they had been duped into buying something far more ordinary. The legal filing bluntly accuses the company of unfair competition, false advertising, and unjust enrichment. Why is this such a big deal? Because San Marzano has long been the benchmark for quality in cooking. They are sweeter, less acidic, and carry a distinctive flavor profile. Chefs specify them by name. Cookbooks mention them explicitly. When a can pretends to belong to that category, it is not just a branding slip. It is a direct attack on consumer trust and exploitation of food culture itself. Imagine ordering Parmigiano Reggiano and getting a bag of generic grated cheese instead. That is the level of insult here. The statistics back this up. Italy exports only a fraction of San Marzano tomatoes each year, and yet supermarket shelves across America are flooded with cans claiming some connection to that name. Industry experts estimate that more than 90% of the cans labeled San Marzano in the United States are not actually certified DOP products. Into that fog of confusion steps San American, using ambiguity as a business model. It is the classic bait and switch executed on a national scale. The galling part is how brazen the defense has been. Company representatives have argued that SMT is simply a brand name not intended to mislead. But consider this: why choose letters that look and sound almost identical to San Marzano? Why color the can in the exact palette of the Italian flag? Why market the product at a price point nearly equal to the real thing? These are not coincidences. They are deliberate choices meant to siphon credibility from a name with centuries of reputation behind it. And while this might feel like a gourmet issue, it hits everyone. Older Americans on fixed incomes pay more believing they're getting something special. Families stretch their food budget for a treat that turns out to be a sham. The harm is financial and emotional. Food is supposed to be honest, but here honesty was stripped away the second the can was printed. After hearing about cans laced with plastic phony Italian labels and factories cutting corners, you might be wondering if any brand can still be trusted. The answer is yes, but it is a very short list. Number 1. Bianco DiNapoli organic tomatoes. What sets Bianco DiNapoli apart is not just a pretty label. Their tomatoes are grown in Northern California, a region responsible for more than 90% of America's processing tomatoes, but instead of focusing on volume, they focus on quality. Every tomato is harvested at peak ripeness, then steam peeled, not live peeled. That distinction matters. Steam peeling preserves flavor and nutrients, and it avoids chemical residues that have sparked concern with other brands. This is not a shortcut. It is a deliberate choice that costs more in time and energy, but pays back in purity. The organic certification is another major line of defense. These cans carry the USDA organic seal, which means no synthetic pesticides, no GMOs, and no synthetic fertilizers. And this is not a vague promise. Organic farms are subject to regular audits, soil tests, and compliance checks. In 2023, USDA data showed that organic tomato acreage in California represented less than 10% of total fields. That scarcity alone shows you how rare it is for a processor to commit fully to organic standards, yet Bianco DiNapoli does so across its line. Packaging is another critical detail. While so many companies hide behind vague claims of BPA-free, Bianco DiNapoli has committed to using cans lined with safer alternatives documented by independent certifications. Studies published by consumer watchdog groups in 2022 found that more than 60% of canned goods in the U.S. still tested positive for bisphenol compounds. Bianco DiNapoli stood out as a clean exception. For consumers worried about hormone disruption or cumulative chemical exposure, this detail is not cosmetic, it is vital. The proof also shows up in taste tests. Food critics from national outlets, along with chefs in both New York and Los Angeles, consistently rank Bianco DiNapoli tomatoes among the best. A blind test conducted by a major culinary magazine in 2021 placed their whole peeled tomatoes first out of 12 brands, citing sweetness balance and natural depth. While taste is subjective, repeated results across professional kitchens tell you this brand is not skating by on reputation alone. What does this mean for everyday shoppers? It means you finally have a can you can put in your cart without second guessing. Seniors watching sodium levels can trust the low-salt option to be exactly as labeled. Families on a budget can choose the larger cans, knowing the flavor will hold up in soups and sauces, without having to buy overpriced imports. And anyone tired of feeling tricked by false advertising can feel some relief. Here is a label that matches the product inside. Bianco DiNapoli earns the first safe spot because it has built trust in a market that has been eroded by shortcuts and deception. When other cans gamble with your health, your wallet, and your patience, this one does the opposite. It proves that honesty still has a place on the shelf, and that real tomatoes grown with care can still make it into a can without compromise. Number 2. Muir Glen Organic Diced. Finding a can of tomatoes you can trust should not feel like hunting for buried treasure. After all the recalls, lawsuits, and deceptive marketing, we have just uncovered the idea of grabbing something safe and reliable almost feels too good to be true. But Muir Glen Organic stands as proof that it is possible. Where other brands cut corners, this one has leaned into accountability. And that commitment shows up not only in the ingredient list, but in every stage from farm to can. Start with the farming. Muir Glen sources its tomatoes from California's Sacramento Valley, a region where the soil and climate are particularly suited to tomatoes. The company made the switch to full organic production back in 1991, long before organic became trendy. That decision meant saying no to synthetic pesticides, no to genetically modified seeds, and yes to labor practices audited for fairness. By 2022, Muir Glen's acreage represented one of the largest organic tomato operations in the country, while still accounting for only a sliver of the total tomato market. Less than 10% of American tomatoes are organic, so every acre committed to this standard matters. Then there is the handling. The tomatoes are field-packed within hours of harvest. That short window reduces spoilage and keeps sugars intact, which is why their diced product tastes noticeably fresher than many competitors. A consumer survey conducted in 2021 found that more than 70% of buyers who switched to Muir Glen cited clean taste as the #1 reason. That statistic says a lot because flavor is the detail that shoppers can feel immediately, no lab test required. Packaging is another place where this brand separates itself. While the industry still struggles with bisphenol compounds in can linings, Muir Glen became one of the first national tomato brands to adopt BPA-free cans, and they did it years ahead of many competitors. Independent watchdog testing in 2022 confirmed that Muir Glen cans consistently tested below detection limits for bisphenols. For consumers wary of cumulative exposure, that data point is not abstract, it is peace of mind. The company also invests in pollinator health. It may sound small, but they have partnered with groups to maintain bee habitats around their farms. Why mention bees in a tomato discussion? Because pollinator decline is a major agricultural issue. By maintaining healthier ecosystems, Muir Glen shows a kind of responsibility that most large processors never even acknowledge. It signals that they are not just looking at the season's yield, but at the bigger picture of sustainability. Accessibility is another factor. Bianco DiNapoli, while excellent, can sometimes feel like a specialty product. Muir Glen, in contrast, is widely available. You can find it at Target, Whole Foods, and online platforms like Amazon. Price-wise, it lands above generic private labels, but well below imported San Marzano. For families juggling fixed incomes or retirees balancing grocery budgets, that middle ground matters. It means you can buy organic without feeling like you are paying gourmet markups. When you add it all up, decades of certified organic farming, fast field-to-can handling, proven safe packaging, and nationwide availability, Muir Glen stands out as a practical, safe choice. It does not rely on smoke and mirrors. It does not hide behind legal disclaimers. It puts the words "organic diced tomatoes" on the can and then delivers exactly that. That is why Muir Glen earns the second safe spot. In a market crowded with mistrust, it provides something simple but rare, a product that actually matches the promise printed on the label. For shoppers weary of deception, this is the brand that restores a little confidence each time the can opens with a clean, steady click. So here it is: 5 brands that have lost the right to your trust, and 2 that have proved honesty can still exist on a grocery shelf. Canned tomatoes may look identical in the aisle, But now you know the gap between deception and integrity is wide enough to change the taste of every meal. The real question is simple: what's sitting in your pantry right now? Drop a comment and tell us if you've bought any of these cans before, and whether today's list changes how you shop tomorrow. And if this video helped you see through the label, share it with someone who still thinks all tomatoes are created equal.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.